Today on Off the Hinges, relax, pour yourself a drink, and unwind from your week as I answer your questions and share stories about this week's trade. I'm joined by a special guest, and I have my whiskey in hand. I'm so glad you made it. Are you ready? Let's slide into the vault. Welcome to Friday. Welcome back to the vault. This man that you see, I'm about to just stop talking really quickly because I'm excited for you to hear his voice primarily throughout the majority of this conversation, but a couple things to tee it up. A really dear friend, a true occupational mentor is a Marine Corps officer. So he's now retired. Willy Buhl, retired Marine Corps colonel. The common disclaimer of, yes, I'm an active duty Marine. He's still working with the Marine Corps out in Camp Pendleton. He'll tell you all about that. So none of what we say is representative or endorsed by the Department of Defense, United States Marine Corps, any government or military organization. This is two brothers, two friends, and it's an honor to call you that are just talking about a virtue and a topic that is near and dear to our hearts. This man has fascinating stories and a fascinating ability to tell stories. So you are in for a treat. As I take a sip, over to you, good sir and my friend, and just say hi to the people. Tell them who you are.
Well, good morning, everybody. Willy Buhl, yes, retired Colonel of Marines, but I started as a private of Marines on those yellow footprints at the Marine Corps Recruit Depot. I'm in a new job, which I'll talk about in a bit, as Josh introduced me, and I'm drinking my coffee out of a second lieutenant coffee mug because, to a degree, I'm not quite 6 months into my job. I still feel a bit like a salty second lieutenant here.
A very salty
new
one, maybe the
duties.
saltiest. Yes.
I want one of the
One of,
perhaps.
yes.
Anyway, it's an honor and a pleasure to be aboard, and thank you for the disclaimer. I'm ready to go.
Let's go. So we're talking about interpersonal relationships, and there's so many different ways we can go with this. So we're just going to go wherever this takes us. And I will say up front also,
Sure.
my introduction to this man, while you will hear some of his story and responses, we're going to unpack this probably with some of the story, but it goes back a long time, actually. So I know I had him as an EWS instructor after he had retired. So the blended seminar that they do, it's a professional military education that captains have to take to be eligible for promotion. And I went through that when I was stationed out in Pendleton. But even before that, I had interacted with him loosely when I was a part of the 13th Marine Expeditionary Unit, and you were still active duty. And I was doing training called what they call RUT-MUX training. So that was under who then was Colonel Anthony Henderson, who's now a general, was the MU commander. And we had people who only Marines will probably recognize, but like Robert Coates was helping with a lot of the staff training. And I was doing what they call RUT-MUX up at Fort Hunter Liggett in Northern California. And Willy Buhl was one of the team there based on his job that he had at the time that was really just mentoring, advising, observing what was happening. And so my company and my unit was doing some of the vertical tactical recovery of aircraft and personnel. So I was a young lieutenant that was the MU vertical trap commander. And this man, before he probably even knew my name, I was able to sit at the end of briefing tables or just be in his area and watch his sphere of influence with people. So even though I now have a personal experience with him, his reputation in the best of ways precedes him. And you're sort of an iconic legend when it comes to the Blue Diamond and in First Mar Div. So it's at least on the people that I've talked to. So it's an honor. But my top 3 questions that I always come out with, he gets them too, just like everybody else. No one is immune. Number 1, what are you thankful for this week?
Well, I'm thankful for that introduction and reintroduction that you just gave right out the gate, and my response to those, to whenever someone talks about me like that, is to make sure that I remember that I'm perhaps 5'8" in desert boots in terms of height, and to try to measure up. It's a little bit of humor, to remain humble. So yeah, what am I thankful for? Josh and I spoke briefly before we got on the official camera. if you will. And it is not a cliche. I am thankful for every day that I wake up, that I am alive and that I am able to function in some productive way and contribute in some productive way, to the world around me, to the people that I love and care about. Sometimes for people that I don't even know, but I have a chance meeting with, that I can leave them perhaps with a smile or a better feeling, or a um, a positive engagement of some type. So I'm thankful for that. And I've had a few, like most of us in life in different capacities, I've had a few close calls, and I've lost people around me that I loved and cared about, some in the natural progression of life, and then some in, places like combat action, um, and accidents. And so I am more aware, perhaps than some, of how fragile life can be, and good health, things of that nature. I don't take these things for granted, so I'm thankful for that. And since I'm on a bit of a talkative roll, I'm going to bring it back again. I'm really thankful for my family, which I will. That is your cornerstone of relationships, I think. It isn't for all of us, and I have observed leaders and people that I've worked with who had family challenges that affected their everyday, their outlook, their actions, their ability to lead and or perform their duties.
Mhm.
So family, the bedrock of your interpersonal relationships. And I feel very thankful that I have two families. I have the family, my BUHL, my last name, the three children that I have who are all grown adults, including a couple of granddaughters, now, and my Marine Corps family.
Mhm.
And a bit by extension in that Marine Corps family, those that I have encountered through my service in the Marine Corps, that I consider part of that Marine Corps family.
Absolutely.
Uh, yeah. So that's a thankful. I'm going to add, and I brought it up already, but I'll just reinforce it here, that I have a purpose. That I have a purpose in life. One, obviously, is to care for those people that I love, and two, it's to and I wrote a little note to myself, people that I love, including my dog,
Oh yeah.
and having to wake up every day with my dog Milo. It's so important to have people and things to care for. Dogs give you a great purpose, and a good feeling. We could talk about that more. To have a job, to have something. I retired, but I couldn't retire.
Mhm.
And you want to continue to give back and make a difference if you can. Um, and I'm sort of, these are repetitive, but I'm thankful that I am able to have a community that I can contribute to, and a world around me in that
Yeah.
same in the same sense.
That is who I know you to be. And it doesn't surprise me that your list of thanks seems long, but I think it could have gone on for hours. And I do agree that your gratitude, your humility, which you shared, and you can just hear that in the way that you interact and you communicate with people. I think it is foundational to who I know you to be and who I see you as very good with interpersonal relationships and what that means to communicate, to connect with empathy, with some humility. It's really important, but it doesn't shock me that you just have this endless list of thanks, because when you bring that spirit into a room, into a space with other people, it's really hard not to gravitate to someone like you, and specifically to you. And I mean that because I've seen that. I've seen it with young officers. I've seen it with young enlisted, anyone from the Marine side of the family, as we say, who is how I know you most. Um, your gratitude and your thanks for the people around you has been pretty peerless. It's fantastic. So I really appreciate that. But I will also say I probably won't mention too much about your gratitude for the dog because my little girls ruthlessly hound me that they want to hound, and that is such a fight right now. So maybe I'll clip that out when I share this with them. Who knows? But yeah, we'll
A
see.
dog or a cat,
And
we had a cat named
it's endless.
Batman,
Oh
you
my
know.
goodness. It's
I'm sorry. Yeah, I stepped on him.
no,
We
you're
had
good.
these three little girls came to our front door in base housing with this cat in their arms that they were holding upside down, big black cat.
Hmm.
And no, I did not want a cat. We had
No,
just moved into, we
nope.
had just executed a transfer, and my kids saw the cat, and they were little, they were, I don't know, 6 and 8, and "Dad, please," and oh,
Yep.
you got a long clip to your long excerpt out of here.
Oh my goodness, I
Anyway,
know.
yeah,
All right. Well,
sorry.
next, what have you been learning lately?
I mentioned my new job, and
Hmm.
so I retired after not quite 35 years of enlisted and commissioned service, and I went and taught expeditionary warfare school where we met formally. And by the way, to return the favor, one of the reasons, return the compliment in favor, one of the reasons I did that job was so rewarding, was because I had students like you who not only kept people like me and Mr. and Mr. Wolf and others on our toes, all retired colonels, etc.
Fantastic, man. Oh,
But not only did you keep us on our toes, but boy, what a joy it was to engage with young developing officers who were so bright and so good every day. And you were one of the bright notes, and it's no surprise to me that you've taken on this project and that you're seeking, greater education and development and everything else. So back to here, I did that for 8 years, a little over 1,000 captains. I added it up. I had to.
of
I
course.
went into the nonprofit um, space, and it wound up being service at another school. I went down to a trade school, workshops for warriors,
Hmm.
and they taught machining and welding to predominantly veterans, and the instructors were predominantly veterans. They were mostly Navy and Marines, and the senior instructors were accomplished Navy welders who had been on nuclear powered ships and submarines.
Hmm.
So that was a dream of mine to just try some nonprofit work, and they gave me a lofty title there of director of strategic initiatives. But what it really gave me was an opportunity to build some flexibility and creativity into my daily duties. But back here, so I did that for not quite a year, and I was enjoying the work, and it had been a dream. In fact, I had pursued it when I first transitioned from when I retired, but the EWS Expeditionary Warfare School job was waiting for me. I got started on it, and once I did, I settled in and enjoyed it. You couldn't have a bad day with a room full of captains and chief warrant officers asking questions, and you know, talking about everything that was relevant to what I had spent decades doing.
Hmm.
So I got a chance kind of later in life to really, after I retired, to transition really for the first time into this civilian space.
Hmm.
Um, but while I was doing it, the network, the relationships, I got a call and an opportunity to fulfill a new role. These types of roles open maybe once a decade ish, because retired colonels or so, people like that fill them, and they're so good and so enjoyable and worthy that people don't leave them.
Yeah.
And so I came in a couple of informal conversations, and I was offered a direct hire To be an easy title would be Government and External Affairs Director for the Installations Command in the Western United States for the Marine Corps. And what am I learning? I am learning this new job that I've been in for 6 months, some of which are old school, easy, because I had 35 years of service and I know a lot of people and have kept to current. And then a lot of it is very installation, operation specific and a whole new world to me.
Yeah.
And that's a long-winded answer, but I'm learning that. I am always reading something, and relative to those duties is the partnership we have with some of those tree huggers that people might call, people that are environmentally aware. And full disclaimer, I grew up in California, Northern California.
Yeah.
I grew up in the Santa Cruz Mountains. I'm a tree hugger.
There you go.
I'm a centrist, I guess, politically, if you wanted to label me. But
Sure.
Yeah, I work on a big giant nature preserve, and it's a country drive to work every day.
Isn't it fascinating?
Okay, I'm talking an awful lot.
It's good though. Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
Pendleton is fascinating when you look at the history and the
I love
landscape,
it.
and it's amazing. Yeah, you should all go Google Camp Pendleton and just look at the history from an environmental perspective. It'll blow your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
We are a giant environmental preserve in Southern California. There's nothing else like us. 22 miles of coastline that's undeveloped and virtually the same as it's been since the Ahachime Native Americans called it home here. And we just signed a 25-year agreement with California State Parks to extend their lease, specifically the San Onofre Beach area, which coincidentally has been designated as the host location for the 2028 Olympics, the Los Angeles Olympics.
Yep.
We're going to have the surf competition there.
Yep.
And, the Native Americans were at the ceremony. It is their land. We for national defense, the Marine Corps are using it, and the state parks have it open for the public.
I will say though,
go ahead, please.
I will say that while this isn't endorsed by the Marine Corps, recruiters are going to love me for this comment I'm about to make. So if you listen to what Willie just said, all of the surf breaks, they call it trestles and churches, all this beautiful surf break there, which is the north side of Camp Pendleton, and it's world class, and it's part of the World Surf League, and now it's going to be part of the Olympics. Well, everybody is jealous that the Marines get to park on base to access some of the most pristine, right next to the beach parking if you go to the campsite there that's on base. So all of my surfer friends, when I was stationed there, would say, dude, can we get on base with you to park so we don't have to walk as far to get the trestles? So if you're young, you love to surf, you love your country, and you want to have good surf parking, roll the dice and list, and maybe you can park on churches. I don't know. So there's your plug. Recruiters, you're welcome. But it's fascinating.
Awesome endorsement.
There you have it. Brought it full circle. Okay, so
I'd add that this profession is the ultimate fitness club too.
It sure is. Yep, it sure is. I'd say when you said that, when you were talking about Stefan Bien and trying to stay, physically sharp and the benefits that is, that's what I think of that, because I see whether it's posts that you have or just knowing you from back when we did EWS together, and that guy's also just a machine physically. So whether it be triathlons that you compete in. Yeah, so retired colonels still getting after it. That's the Marine Corps way. And these guys are setting the standard well past 35 plus years of service. So if you're a young Marine, catch up. Those guys are setting the pace.
Well, we are slowing down. There's no question. Time marches on, but you can slow the aging. I had another note. Speaking of which, I did a triathlon this past Sunday down San Diego International, down at Spanish Landing. And, I'm constantly working on my triathlon TTPs. I wore some buoyancy shorts instead of a wetsuit. It was a balmy 68 degrees in the ocean, and that was warm enough for me. for the swim.
Yeah.
So I'm always trying to improve different things.
What was the verdict of
I
the
added
shorts to the
that to my
wetsuit?
little learning notes. I
Yeah.
like it,
Yeah.
and
Good.
I had no issues. Yeah, and I swam. I'm slow, but I swam roughly at PR speed for the swim leg. It is an area I can because it what I started at such a low bar. It's an area I've continued to improve on. I think it's like golf or skiing, a few of these sports where there are very tiny incremental things you can work and improve on and get better.
Yeah.
Swimming is something that you can do into your old age.
Yeah. It's fantastic. All right. Let's see. Next question for you. How do you hope to grow and transform as hopefully you can find time for resting and reflection heading into the weekend or whenever you try to find that throughout your week?
Yeah, that's a great question. I thought about it. I have a lifelong, I held this, Unlikely Ally, book up. I try to read, always make time to read. I've have a lot of work things to read. Very recently, lately, I've dominated with all the unclassified open source news posts, etc., on Midnight Hammer and some of the operations that are occurring in the Middle East. So reading is one. Self-study. Um, I I added personal growth is also making time for other parts of personal development. I just mentioned swimming. I do an awful lot of yoga. I would say I do yoga 5 days a week. Sometimes, occasionally, I will get a 7 day stretch where I have gone to yoga class every day for a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I would if I had a clear schedule.
Yeah.
So that's another area that also enables me. Exercise is dual use. It's one. It's of course it's your health and fitness, but it's moving, or sometimes quiet meditation and reflection, slowing life down enough to actually to quietly think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I find ideas in yoga practice. You're supposed to clear your mind. Actually, I get some of my great inspiration there, or on a run, or in a swimming pool underwater with
Yeah.
no one able to interrupt me.
That's fantastic. I love it. I do remember too. That's funny that you say yoga because I had that in my mind when we were initially talking and I brought up EWS. And I would remember coming back from a lunch break into maybe our syndicate breakout rooms, and there would be, retired colonel, and all these Marines are just sort of like jaw drop on the floor, enamored at the stories of hearing you or Stephen Bien or Ty Wallace or the team that was just fantastic. Retired colonels, retired MEU commanders, all this stuff. And there's Willy on the table in the middle of the room, sort of doing a yoga stretch in his, and he's like, oh, okay, well, Marines, you got to stay sharp, but you also got to stay flexible. And, yoga is going to help you out. And you'd have these captains go like, what is this guy doing? But it broke up the stuffiness of the room. And it was just, that's who you are.
Being approachable is very important, I think, because people, if they get comfortable with you, and that's part of, I think, your authenticity piece of your learning model that you shared with me, your interrelationships model.
Yeah.
The people that are approachable will hear things that people who are not as approachable or unapproachable won't. We have so many wonderful historical examples of commanders that were unapproachable and weren't privy to potentially great ideas that could have enabled better success for the team, etc. So yeah, that's one of my disarming methods, is just to do things that are unexpected. You can't be too you, you can't be too abnormal. There's got to be some conformity there, too unique. but just a bit of it will enable people to just relax around you and tell you more, talk about
Exactly.
things with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. This next
So,
question, it
mhm.
is such a loaded question, but you know me, it's a blank canvas and you paint this however you desire. But man, I know a little bit about you and I know you have such a backdrop. But I'm just gonna ask it and you go whichever way you want. What
Sure.
is your story? The story of Willy Buhl.
I made short notes. I grew up in a small town in Northern California that today would be an exclusive, sought after place that only perhaps doctors, high tech, senior executives, people that were extremely affluent could live. But when I grew up in Los Gatos, California, it was just an ordinary small town with a range of middle class people. And so my upbringing was modest and almost sort of classically American small town in a beautiful place. And I was a newspaper boy, and I worked in a restaurant where I had my first serious exposure to immigrant workers, a Mexican restaurant.
Mhm.
And I worked in a factory canning fruit for several years. So I had an experience with manufacturing. I worked general labor, construction sites, mostly hauling lumber, going to the lumber yard to pick up wood, but sometimes digging ditches, cleaning job sites, things of that nature. And then I enlisted in the Marine Corps. After 2 years at university, a state university, I wrestled growing up. That was the sport I chose from junior high through into the beginning of college, one season as a freshman.
Mhm.
I joined a fraternity, which exposed me to many different people and relationships, some order and discipline, much like a sports team, and much like my parents who raised me, who were both my father was a Marine, enlisted Marine. My stepfather, who really raised me, was a British officer in World War II,
Wow.
saw extensive combat in World War II. Was very strict. He grew up with Victorian parents. We had difficulties. I had to live with my grandmother for 2 years because we we didn't get along, and I could go into it with greater depth. But suffice to say, I had to go live with my nana, who
Mhm.
was a Sicilian immigrant. Three of my grandparents, two from Sicily on my mom's side. My dad's mom was from Ireland. My stepfather was British, as I just told you. So I had a big external, predominantly European influence in my upbringing, but immigrant upbringing. And then I joined the Marine Corps, and that was, an adventure. We all joined for different things. I wanted to see the world and test
Mhm.
myself and find out if I was, could be one of the few, the proud, and all of that. And it was just one adventurous job after another, almost every one of them.
Yeah.
And some were a little painful at times. I worked in the Pentagon for Secretary Gates for a couple of years. Wonderful, admire the man deeply. One of my heroes in life, um, Robert Gates. And but that was a painful job in many other respects.
Yes.
It might not have been such an adventure, if you will.
Right.
Um, Okay. So, met and married while I was at Expeditionary Warfare School. We called it Amphibious Warfare School before that. I
Mhm.
met an Austrian woman through one of my fellow classmates who was an army officer who had been assigned to Germany and had gone skiing down in Innsbruck and had met my ex-wife now, in fair to be full disclosure, her sister. And
Mhm.
so I married an Austrian lady, and that further exposed me to other cultures. Raised three children with her. One I inherited, who was six, and then two boys I made with her. One of whom just left active duty in the Marine Corps as a captain
Wow.
and is working. Yeah. Yes. So I don't want to go too much further with a long-winded answer, except to say that my Marine Corps career took me around the world. I lived in Iceland for 2 years. We were talking a little about the Nordic countries before we started the
Hmm.
recording. Um, uh, I'm always looking. I always looked for innovative. Innovation is another one of your tenets, I think, in your interrelationships piece. And so we partnered with the local, I was the commander of the security force company we used to have at Keflavik Naval Air Station, which
Yep.
was a NATO joint command there, still there. It shared the airport with Iceland's international airport
Right.
for Reykjavik.
Yep.
And to be quick, we did some training because they have 21 glaciers in Iceland, and they have the biggest glacier in Europe, Vatnajökull. And we partnered. We found out. I got to meet and talk with through the fire department and the emergency services, a search and rescue team there. Flugvjornsveitin, the air search and rescue team there. Iceland doesn't really have a military; they have a coast guard, and they have a search and rescue teams that are among the most elite in the world.
Hmm.
And they wanted to do some military things, and we wanted to do some of life-saving mountaineering skills training. So we partnered with them, and what a partnership, friendship it became. So much so that a couple of us actually took it a stretch further, and I did Viking reenacting with a number of the
That's
search and
awesome.
rescue team
Yeah.
folks, literally in authentic kit, and traveled around and learned how to use a medieval sword and shield and axe and scram a sax, and I'll stop with it. But um, yeah, I'm offering a story or two for you to just tell you that, I've sort of expanded the horizon to do some interesting and unique things
Hmm.
that might be very unexpected for a Marine officer.
Yeah.
Maybe a highlight. I'll leave you with this one story. I went down to do the Battle of Hastings 2000. 11 of us traveled, two Americans and nine Icelanders, one of which was a Swiss lady who had moved to Iceland, went down to Britain, to England, and participated as Normans in the Battle of Hastings, 1066. Charging up Senlock Hill,
Right.
I think 9 times. Yeah. Anyway, it's a famous story, but we slept out in the field. It was this big international gathering. BBC filmed it. It's the largest up to that point reenactment that had ever occurred. So I did some just really interesting, unique, one of a kind type of experiences. And I'll add a different one for you. In Norway, I was invited out to um, travel up to all the border stations between Norway, Finland, and up to Russia.
Hmm.
And I did a 9-day snowmobile patrol,
That's
staying
awesome.
at cabins, border posts,
Hmm.
with a group of senior Norwegian officers. I'll tell you, I was very saddle sore the first couple of days.
I bet.
Um, but it was an extraordinary thing. And this is a little before full GPS and everything. We had a Laplander guide who
Hmm.
he had his own internal navigation system in sometimes completely obscured visibility. We always
Oh yeah.
seemed to get exactly where we were supposed to. It's amazing.
Well, I mean, in northern Norway, that becomes very austere, pretty rough terrain. I mean, for those that haven't been in Norway, if you're trying to go from south of Norway to north of Norway, there is basically like one large main road that can take you up. Of course, there's offshoots, but then based on the time of year, even heavily trafficked common roads will just be closed down, especially through the passes. So you're not getting around by just regular vehicles in a
No.
lot of spots of the country. And then once you get up towards the weather up there is one thing, but also just the entire climate is crazy too. Because if you're looking in, they call it land of the midnight sun, of course. When you're looking at, let's say a good friend of mine that works with the Norwegian Joint Headquarters and Cold Weather Center of Excellence, and just different colleagues that are from northern Norway, like near Finnmark, near the Russian border. And they're like, yeah, when people do planning
Yes.
from a military perspective, and they're like, oh, well, we'll have this cycle of darkness. He goes, no, no, no. In the summer, you don't have night. You might get 2 hours of twilight, maybe, and then you have day, and that's it. And it's wild. So if you aren't there, you can't appreciate what that's like to live in extreme sun or constant
it is
black.
very unique.
Oh, it's wild.
Yes.
It's wild.
It's amazing. And it has other implications too. The darkness. I'll offer the best suicide prevention training I ever experienced. I was a major in Iceland, and a team came from Norway to offer a seminar and training education package. And I raised my hand to do it. And it was the best I've ever experienced. Norway has a national suicide prevention, or it did at that time, team. And it is a national challenge. It is for the world,
Right.
but particularly with that darkness and substance abuse, alcohol particularly. And it was the best training I had, and I've used it up to the present day. Like my big takeaways, if you for awareness, suicide awareness, this is one of the things I remembered from the course is, if someone that you are concerned about has any family history of suicide, if there is any substance abuse, drugs or alcohol involved, and or if they have a plan. If you have two or more of those key indicators of the three I just mentioned, you have an absolute serious, legitimate, emergent case on your hands.
Yeah.
That was my takeaway.
Yeah.
Boy, okay. Yeah. So I don't know that I honestly really describe my life. You just got a few insights and things, but I've been on an adventure, and it's taken me to the snowy border of Finland. It's taken me out to the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in the Middle East, in Iraq.
Yeah.
It's taken me up to, all over the world.
Well, on that, we don't need to go
Marine
deep
Corps.
into all the experiences, but I think it would be interesting, especially maybe for our Marine Corps colleagues who may not be as familiar with your backdrop. You can also Google and see a lot of his bios because he did a lot of time, so you can find a lot of things. But give a quick snapshot of some of the key, because you've commanded in some really prestigious storied units, and especially coming from an infantry officer to an infantry officer, some fantastic units that really mean something to who we are and what our breed is. But in a quick snapshot, give a picture, if you would, of that side of your story, like where you've been and some of the really fantastic units you've been honored to command, which is a tip of the hat to just your expertise and abilities.
Okay,
But also,
I'll hit a couple of high points.
That'd be awesome.
A couple of high points. I started out as an enlisted infantry, but specifically joined to serve in reconnaissance, and I was fortunate to go in the reserves to 4th Force Recon Detachment, 4th Force Recon in Reno, Nevada.
Yep.
And the immediate highlight of that, the day I arrived from my first drill weekend, I did spy rigging and repelling. The first day I showed up, literally, I drew equipment, got a sling rope for a Swiss seat and some D-rings. And the next thing I knew, I was suspended under a helicopter, flying around, like Superman with my arms out. And I just said to myself, this is the best decision you've ever made in your life. I mean, that was day one.
That's
and
awesome.
To a degree, I think I've already said this. I feel like that describes my whole career experience. And as time passes, you remember the good things. Of course, you have to highlight some tragedies and bad things because
Sure.
they're learning. You learn from them, and you remember those who you cared about who are not with us. But you remember mostly the good things. Anyway, so that's how I started, and all my leaders were Vietnam veterans at that time. We're
Mm.
talking 1982, and that had a powerful effect on me. There's generational differences every generation, and these guys were crazy. They were crazy, and they played hard off duty at every rank. There was a lot of alcohol consumption. Some of the things we've taken great measure to kind of tamp down over time, and
Yeah.
probably for the best. Highly proficient. They had all seen heavy action.
Hmm.
Most of them were force reconnaissance Marines who had been behind enemy lines in
Hmm.
Vietnam, and then they were hands on. It was another time in the Marine Corps. They were very, very hands on,
Yeah.
and as long as you did your job, you didn't have to worry about it. So I took all that, and I went to my first after infantry officer course. I went to a rifle platoon in Charlie Company 19,
Mm.
and we had a strong network of Vietnam vets. Our gunnery sergeant in the three shop, Top Polanski, or Master Guns Polanski, had actually been a lance corporal in Vietnam in the Vietnam in 19.
Yeah.
Our battalion commander, XO, and sergeant major all were combat vets, as was our Ops O. So this was the last bit of that crossover from the Vietnam period where you could join an infantry battalion and still have some of that
Hmm.
that experience. So I started in a storied infantry battalion, the Walking Dead. I
Yeah.
got lucky. I went out to I was the Marine Corps needed intelligence and logistics officers, and I was fortunate enough to compete and be able to stay in as long as I accepted a broadening tour in intel, and I did that, and it kept me in the fleet for 6 years, and it got me out to Desert Storm. As a brand spanking new captain while I was at Intel school, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. I don't
Mm.
want to go off into stories. I could talk for a long period about it. And it kept me in the fleet, and then I went to Somalia with a MEU after that. So I just hit all the right lucky timing and luck, and served in some great units and served with some great people. My MEU commander was a man named Colonel Hagee, who later became
Hmm.
Commandant of the Marine Corps, and he was ashore with his intelligence officer, and they were at a vehicle checkpoint in civilian clothes being taken around with what later turned out to be some people from a three-letter agency in a technical vehicle. And a young Somali teenager, we think, put an AK-47 in the eye socket of the major, Bob Kunert, the colonel's two, and hurt him, physically hurt him, and it shook him up to have a loaded weapon put in his eye socket abruptly, and he was unable to go back into Mogadishu the next day, and so the BLT S2, yours truly, Captain Buell, had a wonderful, extraordinary opportunity with an MP5 and a little hand satchel and my pistol under my shirt to escort the colonel around. I met Farah Aidid and
Wow.
others. Anyway, so it's like that in life, right? And if you work hard and you do good, you make your luck.
Hmm.
And so after that, I was a rifle company commander. I had an independent deployment down in Panama. From there, I was very lucky. I've already hit Iceland and things. I went to schools, and then I commanded the 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines, and um, that was in the wake of being pulled from the School of Advanced Warfighting. So I got pulled out of school. I got sent out. I became a planner in the MEF, Future Operations component of the headquarters. And then one day I got called in by the future OPSO and the OPSO and was told that I was going to create a jump command post for the MEF commanding general, Lieutenant General Conway, also who became Commandant of the Marine Corps, one of the great men I've served under with for. And I ran the general's jump for the march up. And we went to every battalion and regimental headquarters in the MEF. And it was an extraordinary experience. It was something akin to the General's War. Right. And I had a firsthand look. And from there, I went to 3-1, and I had 6 days to get my family from Quantico, Virginia to California to take the colors from a man named Lou Creparata, who just retired as a 3-star general in the Marine Corps, and was on a short list to return back to Iraq, which we did. And that has been the great honor of my life, that OIF-2 deployment, with heavy loss, sadly. 33 men in the battalion gave their lives during that deployment. Complex counterinsurgency for the first 4 months, high intensity urban combat, roughly 1 month, nine intense days in clearing West Fallujah as the division and main effort, 1st Marine Division main effort battalion. And then a month and change of humanitarian operations, the first elections in 55 years in Iraq. And then I returned. I came back to school. I worked in the Pentagon, and then was fortunate enough to be selected to command the Marine Corps' most decorated infantry regiment, the Fighting Fifth. And the regiment had battalions coming and going from everywhere, but particularly Afghanistan, and 3-5 in particular went to Sangin and experienced in a slightly different but absolutely related way the same type of experience. Jason Morris, who's a major general in the Marine Corps now, the battalion commander then, was in a place called Sangin in southern Helmand province, and had tremendous casualties, very challenging, reasserting control of terrain from the Taliban that had basically had their way for some years. And so maybe the greatest honor I had there, besides caring for our wounded, ill, and injured and their families, then was a follow-on assignment as the Marine Corps' Wounded Warrior Regimental Commander, responsible for all the wounded, ill, and injured Marines and their families across the Marine Corps, directly to the Commandant of the Marine Corps. And I think that's probably those 3 battalion and 2 regimental commands were the things that people would address. But every command is an opportunity. I was a company commander as a first lieutenant for 6 months when my acting company commander went to WTI and transferred, and we were waiting for a captain to come. And so every command opportunity is a careful and powerful experience. And I took advantage of all those opportunities for those moments when I was given the honor and an opportunity to command at the higher levels. Over.
The bookends of your career highlight a really interesting memory from my career. You mentioned on the front end when you were with 4th Recon, in that unit, and a lot of the Vietnam vets that were really shaping your initial experience with the Marine Corps. And then fast forward to right before you said over, and you're talking about Wounded Warrior Regiment. It's fascinating because in 2005, I was at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany. and I was there with Marine Forces
Hmm.
Europe, their
I've
hospital
been.
liaison team. And that was the time before Wounded Warrior became a big thing. There was the Marfor, what we called the HLT. So there was a small handful of us as NCOs at the hospital, a small handful at the flight line. In 2005 to 2006, the year I was there was an insane year for the number of casualties coming from downrange, if you will. And
Oh, yes.
it's
Yes.
interesting because it was crazy. The numbers don't matter, but it was over 1,000 plus that personally I cared for in a 12-month span. It was insane. That had such a thumbprint on the DNA of my career as a young Marine NCO. But there was this one, the name doesn't matter, but there was this one wounded master guns that came through from Iraq. And this guy up in the ICU was also a Vietnam vet. So this guy in the early stages of OIF was someone who had also served at Vietnam, and he's up in the ICU, and he gave me one of the most grisly handshakes. And he saw me, and I was a corporal about to be promoted to the sergeant at the time he saw me. And just his language was gnarly, as you would expect a Marine master guns that had been in Vietnam and now got wounded in Iraq. And it's just, I can't even replicate it. I won't, because it'd just be too vulgar of language, but it was exactly what you would expect. But when he saw me with his huge bare, like catcher mitt glove sized hands, and he just grabbed me and shook my hand, and he said, "I'm so damn glad to see a Marine here." And he had just woken up, and I had taken care of him before he came out of the comatose state he had been in. But it was interesting because I can appreciate in that sliver of the story you shared, the generation of Marine that spanned so many different conflicts from Vietnam to Iraq. And everybody has their own sense of these generational imprints that get passed on. But I truly mean this, like
Yeah.
the brotherhood and the family of the bond in Marines, it transcends all of those eras. And it is just such an instantaneous connection that you have to experience to appreciate.
It's extraordinary.
It
It's
is amazing.
spiritual.
It,
And
it truly
yeah,
is.
it is.
He saw this young corporal, and he was a grisly old master guns. And it was immediately like, you're the brother I want to see right now. And it's really special. That's what stand out to me in that. And I think that tees up this next question sort of perfectly to me.
Hmm.
So when you think about the relationships that have shaped your leadership and your character, not really just your career, but with those things, what stands out to you about how they've been formed or maintained when you reflect on those things and look back in the backdrop?
Every formation, a family reunion. Every meal, a feast. Every
Mm,
paycheck, a small fortune.
mm.
But I feel in the duties that I've assumed here at the Marine Corps Installations West, it's a family reunion every day. It's a family reunion right now with you, and
That it is.
that is something extraordinary about our organization. That I think is, I don't want to say it's entirely unique. I'm sure there are other organizations around the world that share that sort of camaraderie and special bonds. And I learned it early through, a father who was a Marine from my first memories all the way through. And I had another, I was on I&I duty, and I went to Marine Corps League meetings, and I suddenly got exposure in much larger numbers to the World War II and Korea generations, as well as those Vietnam men who had trained me at first. And I stayed in touch with them over time, and I brought them and included them wherever I could in subsequent experiences, to include bridging cultural divides. For example, in Britain, British Royal Marines who had been with 3-1 in Task Force Drysdale at the Chosin Reservoir. And I had two of them come up to Iceland when I was the CO there, and be part guests of honor at mess nights and won a birthday ball. I had these men I invited them to come to our battalion before we deployed and post deployment for field mess nights and things,
Mhm.
and rub elbows, grandfatherly, fatherly, however you would perceive it, with
Sure.
the young Marines there, men who had been in the Pacific and Korea.
Wow.
So I don't know if that answers your question, but those connections are huge.
No, it
And they
does.
can be just as you described. Yeah, just as you described that hospital experience. I'm sure many of the Marines I've served with have a story like that about some of the men I invited to come over and rub elbows with them.
It is. I think something about this too, the relationships, and with that question, what just really stands out to me is the generational bridges that are gapped in such a pure, almost transcendent way. Like you said, it is almost like a spiritual thing. It's not this us versus them generational wars and, wagging of fingers of, oh, in my time. It's this true love for the community that you have with this, whether it's the shared suffering you've gone through together or the shared ups and downs and in betweens. It's a shared purpose from what I've seen, but it's such a tight knit thing.
Yeah.
I love that you said, though, and I agree with you completely. I don't think it's necessarily, while it is unique, I don't think it's unique and isolated to us. I actually believe it's something that you can develop with anything if you are intentional and humble enough to do it. And that's what I think I've come to learn and see in you as well, is that you are very intentional to reach out and build fantastic bridges with people and share your story, which I love how long they are, because it's barely scratching the surface of where you could go with it. I know that, but it's fascinating to listen
yeah. Loquacious, verbose. Yes, and it can be, it's your youth soccer. I was a youth soccer referee for 10 years. It can be with little kids, it can be with older folks, it can be with anyone in any setting. You restated it in a better way than I could. It's about building esprit de corps, but it's about family, right?
It is. It really is. And I think something you do well, because I've experienced, I'll just speak from firsthand exposure of having the joy of being in your presence for the long extent of going through EWS. I had a memory that popped out when I was just sort of thinking of how our paths have crossed and honestly stayed connected, which is also an intentional thing you do with people. Is not just a one and done, but you keep connections, which is leading into this next question. But when I was at EWS, I remember the care that you took to add some levity, add some unique, personality into the space. But also you were just such a pro in whether it was writing papers or assignments that we had to do. You were really good about highlighting people's strengths and giving them honest critique and feedback. Whether it was like things that we had to do for a grade and you'd say, man, that's great, but maybe chop it up a little, use more simple language here. I think, and you would take the time to do the kneecap to kneecap with every captain. Yes. So the true coaching and mentoring and like being genuinely invested in that other that other person's desire and purpose and helping them to where they're trying to go, not just with your intent. So it felt like a mutual relationship, not just a one-way street.
I hope so. I hope so.
And it was
but
fantastic.
As I said, bright people. I had the students. You better be on your toes because everyone has something to offer, and never underestimate that. And make sure that you show respect and acknowledge. You get buy-in. It's part of that authenticity piece that people will want to do more. They will want to strive harder. Some are self-built. Some need nudging. Some need encouragement in different ways to excel or exceed expectations. And managing expectations is a big part of that.
Yeah. In your view,
I like what you're saying.
I like what you're saying. I think this is fantastic. In your view, what do you think it takes to then really stay connected and committed in a very meaningful or life-giving relationship? Because what we do, the day job of Marine Corps, sure, is going to stretch us, whether it's time, distance, everything that life throws at us. And that's sort of the story for a lot of people, even out of the military. So if you find yourself in those positions where physical proximity or just time and distance of relationships get stretched, what can you do to stay connected?
I think communicating with people unexpectedly with no, asking for nothing. Communicating with people unexpectedly to just check in and see how they're doing and how they are, not with any specific ask. is always a joy and a treat. I don't mind a specific ask either, because I like to help if I can be of help.
Right.
I want to do that. So I'm also, by extension, it doesn't bother me that somebody only communicates with me when they want something. But when they communicate with me, when they don't want anything except to just say hello, and that always feels extraordinary to me.
Mm.
And I hope and believe that it works both ways.
Yes.
So that's my takeaway, and something I found in the Marine Corps, a little bit, last little half sentence or two, is that it should feel like, you could pick up the phone and talk to somebody that you've been close with, and it can feel just like yesterday and completely natural, and you can have a catch up. That's the ideal relationship, where
Mhm.
it's just like yesterday, and how are you? And I'm so glad to hear from you.
Yeah,
I think these are common sense things, but important.
it is. It,
Try to build something into yourself, whether you're thinking of someone or you have some sort of systematic way to do so. I don't know. Sometimes I just go down my phone calls or texts, and I go back and see who I haven't talked to or texted with in a long time, and I just randomly pull them up and say a quick hello. Or if there is something that triggers a memory or emotion, I will reach out to them, because it's never been easier to do so. Look what we're doing now across the
Mhm.
world, on this, although we've had some bandwidth challenges.
That's the glory of editing. I can
But
fix
yeah,
that
I
up.
hope that's useful.
It is, and I love that response
I hope
because
that's useful.
it's I've been really challenged. My wife and I just talked about this the other day of how it is. It's never been easier to practically do it, but I feel like so many things distract us. And I think this circles back to the beginning when you were talking about finding time, whether it's through yoga or whatever, to really slow yourself down and not have so much noise thrown into your brain and into your senses that you can go, ooh, if I think of someone, I
Yeah.
can literally just text them right now. And it can be as short as
Hmm.
thankful for you, thinking of you, hope all is well. When I get those unsolicited thoughts, I know how much it just lifts my spirits through the roof of like, man, that was so kind. And it is, but it doesn't demand much aside from being intentional and actually doing the thing. And I think it's the best things are the simplest.
Yeah.
It's so easy. It is so easy.
I completely agree. And but it's easier said than done, like so many things.
I know.
Um,
And here's
but
the honest
yeah,
Josh response. This is maybe it's the planner side of me, and it's maybe just the fact that I know I get so distracted with life, which everyone has excuses. I started setting calendar reminders only for myself to like every so often like text, and I'll have a batch of people, and it's a calendar reminder that pings on my phone, and then I'm like, "Ah, now I have to text them." So if you get random messages from me, now you know I actually had to self prompt myself, but I still love you and I meant it. But I had to set a reminder because I'm not that good. People are like, "How do you do this?" I'm like, "I build it into
we're
my
human.
schedule. I build it into my schedule because I need to, because it's rough." But oh my goodness,
It's the human dimension,
that it is. Give
and
yourself
good
grace.
order and discipline.
Yeah, be
Yeah.
disciplined, be gracious
Yeah.
when you miss the mark, and keep striving. So, as we land this
Yes.
plane, and this has been fantastic, but just final question for you, which sort of leaves an open canvas again. If you were to walk away from this podcast and you're like, talking about relationships, I wish Josh, one of the listeners that sent in questions, would have asked me this. So, from a final thought or putting a bow around it all, what would that question or response be, or what would you want to leave people with?
Yeah. That relationships are the key to making everything in life easier or difficult.
Hmm.
So, managing relationships with others is the art of the, the greatest personal achievements, fulfillment, and satisfaction I've experienced in my life. Success, one individual at a time, and sometimes large groups of people that I found myself representing,
Mhm.
leading.
Yeah.
It has also been, I am divorced. And I have a few, very few, but I do have a small group of people that I probably, and I'm on good terms with my ex-wife. Thank God I'm on the best terms I've been since we separated 9 years ago, divorced shortly after. Thankfully, because I have children who have grown up, and I do love her. But there is a small group of people that I don't communicate with that I've encountered over the years, primarily because I believe they mistreated others,
Mhm.
others that I cared about.
Yeah.
So relationships is everything. It is everything. It is the way of achieving anything that you wish, whether it's personal harmony in your own life or whatever your organizational objectives are, or
Mhm.
anything else in life. And I think everyone knows that, but the art of maintaining and developing relationships continues to be a you know a place where people can never be good enough.
And that is a fact. And I will, as we're talking of family and relationships, I do this at the end of every episode, but I'm first of all very honored and humbled to know you, regardless of any rank or accolades or billets. Just on a personal level, it means a lot that you would say yes, but it means a lot to me for the relationships that I am investing these conversations for, and that's for my wife, Laura, my daughters, Aria, Alessia, Karina, and Aria. I will leave you with this quick snippet of a memory that I have with Willie, which is such a beautiful thing. We were doing EWS. It was when COVID initially hit. It was right before I went to assume my company command in 29 Palms, and I'm in California. And I was the company commander at Unit Leaders Training Company at School of Infantry West. So I'm down there, and it
Yes.
was, you have some resident phases, but during like our last little resident phase, we had to do some Zoom call modules because of all of the restrictions that COVID was placing on us. And it was a really interesting, gnarly time. So where we wanted to stay connected, we couldn't really as much face to face. But I was living in San Clemente, very close to the pier, and I dialed in from home. And my oldest daughter, who is now almost 9, and this was quite a few years ago, so she was young. And I remember we did a call in, and we were doing actually on Zoom, doing like a war game. And tip of the hat to you to even facilitate that, because it was crazy. It was sort of like, how do we make this happen? And during one of the breakout sessions, my daughter comes up to me and she goes, "Daddy, what are you doing?" And so Willie was in a breakout because I was like one of the leads facilitating our group. And Willie's on the other end and he's at home and we're just Zooming. And she goes, "Who's this?" I said, "Well, this is a retired Marine Colonel, Mr. Willy Buhl." Introduce him. And he goes, "Hello, young lady. Hold on a second. I have something for you." And he dips out of frame, much like what we're on now on a Zoom call. And then he dips back in because he's a big history buff and military history and all of these things. And he's wearing this hat, like from, I don't even remember what nationality or service. Maybe it was like an old German helmet. Who knows? And she goes, "Oh, he's the funny hat guy. I like this guy." And so I say all of that to say this conversation is something that I'm so honored to leave to my daughters. It might have been that one. That probably was. So Aria,
Yeah.
there's your funny hat guy. But it was such a beautiful picture of, you took such an immediate pause in what everybody was doing, with other Marines dialed in too, to just pay attention to this maybe 3 or 4 year old little girl and make her feel seen. And I think that's such a beautiful picture of relationships. And I'm honored to leave this talk for them. I'm honored to know you. And over to you for any last thoughts or comments before we sign off. But
It's my honor.
it's been a joy.
It's my honor to be asked. It's been a joy for me. You never underestimate what people will remember
Mm,
about interaction with you. The smallest things can linger and remain as impressions that are influential in the years ahead. We're all one grizzled handshake away from past generations and or future generations.
so true.
So thank you so much for having me aboard, and congratulations on first and foremost that bevy of ladies in
Mm,
the Morano clan. You lucky bastard.
I
And
am. Thank you. I agree.
you are, you are, and everything that you're working on now, for us. Okay?
Thank you. Cheers to
Thank
you.
you for that.
Thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend.
I'm at your service. and love and Semper Fi.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Off the Hinges. Don't forget to follow Foundational Coaching on your favorite social media platforms. Kick off your Saturday with me tomorrow morning at Coffee and Reflections on Substack, where I'll share my reflections and stories on the weekly virtue. I'm honored to be a part of your story today, and I'm proud of your growth, my friend. I can't wait for our next time together, exploring the vault.